Just before I get into what we're actually going to be doing, just a quick reminder of some of the other people that are on the call. Obviously, all of the members, all of you who actually are the core to why we're all here. But again, we have, as we did in previous weekends when we met, we have some of the researchers there. A couple of the groups will have researchers joining their group. Now, you remember that they're observing the whole process. They'll just be some quiet, cameras off in the background, not interacting with your conversations. So, you know, they're just there because they're tracking the whole process, because what we're doing is something really a bit different and really a bit unique. So we need to learn from that. We obviously have our production team, Madly, working in the background, making everything actually run smoothly, and the Secretariat, who've been working with us the whole way through to bring things together and organize the assembly. We also, at different points throughout the day, will have some of the evidence team here, because they're going to be available to be sort of, you know, answering questions and giving some information to you all. And obviously Ian, who will be seeing us has been seeing us the whole way through the process. He'll be here all weekend. We also have our conveners, and they'll be joining and dropping in some of the groups throughout the day. Again, just going on that journey with you. And as we said as we introduced last night, we've got Rosie, our illustrator, who will be keeping us a visual record of some of the things that are spoken about. And, you know, during breaks, we can pop her screen up so you can see what she is actually doing, but you'll be able to see the outputs of that on the website and on social media as we go forward. I'd also like to introduce, we mentioned last night about the quiet room, about this idea of, you know, some of these, getting really into the challenge of climate change and the climate emergency can be difficult, can be stressful, and it's perfectly normal. But actually, so we do, if things get a bit much at any point during the day, do feel free either just take a minute away yourself, or if you want to talk to someone, we've got our sort of climate psychologist, Lindsay, who will be in the quiet room with us all day. So Lindsay, do you want to say hi?
Hello. Yep. Do feel free to come and have a chat with me if you need to. There's nothing daft to chat about. There's nothing you shouldn't be feeling. So absolutely, come and see me if you want to chat.
And very easily, look, you can either to get into the quiet room with Lindsay, you can either just message the support team and we can jump you straight in. You know, we can jump you between rooms, or if you know, put a message to your facilitator that you just need a moment, they can let us know and we can jump you over to come and speak to Lindsay. Okay, I was talking about the support team. Obviously, hopefully by now, you know, you recognize the massive work that they're doing in the background. When people need some help with tech going wrong, do contact them. Don't just sit in frustration if something's not working. They might not be able to solve it. There are some tech things that are out of our control, but definitely do our best to try and help. Okay, and the one other thing I want to say just before I get into the real business of today is around the idea of social media. There's lots of social media going on around the Assembly, and the Climate Assembly's Twitter account and things like this will be putting things out throughout the day. Absolutely engage with this. If you're someone who wants to engage with things on social media, share that we're doing this, share that it's happening. But what I will ask you to do is not to share any of the kind of specific things we're talking about, or the conclusions, or photos of the group or each other. Let's save all that till actually we get to an end and it can come out as a big picture on behalf of the Assembly, rather than letting bits out about other people that may not want what they've said or their picture to go out on social media. But happily, if you're pleased to be here and you're someone on social media, join, link up with the Twitter accounts and others, and you know, let's say we're doing this, and this is kind of exciting. Okay, I think we've got everyone in, and I'm now just going to share my screen for a moment to just give us a bit of an outline of what we're going to be doing for today and the rest of the weekend. So, as you well and truly know by now, we are Scotland's Climate Assembly. Our task for this weekend, And, we think of these weekends as having lots of time in them, but actually some of you will remember we try to get a lot done, and we have to actually really focus and work on what we're trying to do. But our task for this weekend is really to develop collectively across the members, all of the members who are here, and it's the majority of the members that were part of the Climate Assembly, our statement of response to government. And when I say our statement of response to government, what we're aiming for, hopefully by the end of the weekend, we're going to have a good, strong statement. So similar, I guess, to like the statement of ambition that was in the front of our report that we laid before Parliament, but that really sets out collectively and across the groups, these are things that we think actually we're pleased with that's come that in the government response, and also some of the things that maybe we think would have liked them to maybe have gone a bit further. So, as we said, last night we had that chance to actually sort of get our heads back into where we were at the end of weekend 7 with that vision of what, if all our recommendations were put in place, what might Scotland be like? And also that statement of ambition. Learn a bit more from Ian's presentation about what's happened since, but also a chance to catch up with each other and reconnect. This morning, we're going to be doing a whole series of sort of things, really looking at sort of that initial response, starting to collect and explore right across the range of goals and recommendations that we have. What are we feeling about the government's response? This afternoon, connect with the Children's Parliament. And then, Sunday, just that reminder, we've got the Q&A coming up with 2 of the Scottish ministers that are coming to join us, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. Drafting a statement, finalising the statement, and working out what next. So just to give you a bit more detail of what's happening this morning, very shortly when I finish speaking, we'll pop you into your breakout groups, and just to get that sort of check-in of who you're going to be working with this weekend and that initial reactions to the government's response. Following that, some of the members of the evidence group, and many of whom you'll remember because you've heard from them before, and they've been working with us the whole way through. We'll talk a bit more about how they did the colour coding that you've all been sent, and I'll leave it to Ian to explain that a bit later, and just some of their responses to the response from government. And in between that, we'll have lots of little breakout group discussions, lots of kind of short check-in, let's see where we are on certain goals. And obviously we'll give you a break in the middle. And just that reminder, although you won't necessarily, you might want them this morning, we've got our two documents that hopefully most people have got. This is the one where the evidence group have done their kind of traffic lighting as well to give us a bit of a guide about the government response, but also your own report of the Assembly, which has all the goals, the recommendations, but also really importantly, I think the supporting statements that you all wrote that were there to, show what you were trying to achieve with the recommendations. Sometimes the recommendation text is quite short, and the supporting statement goes into a bit more detail about what the whole purpose was. When we come back after lunch, we'll be interacting with the children and some of the children from the Children's Parliament project. You have an opportunity to actually speak with them in small groups and hear what their response, because again, the government response also responded to all of the children's call to actions. But then the bulk of the work after we have a break will be really tying down what is it that we really want to be starting to say in our statement of response. And we'll also do a little bit of work about prepping for the Q&A with our ministers on Sunday. So that's really all I think I want to say now. We're going to pop you into your breakout groups. This will be the group that you're working with for the majority of the weekend. On Sunday, we'll mix it up a little bit. Sunday afternoon, we'll mix it up a little bit. But because you're really going to have, or what we're hoping you're going to have, is this continued conversation throughout the weekend that starts with a big overview and focuses, and over time, we'll build it in, narrowing down to what is it that's most important to you to be able to put back to government. But for now, I'll hand you over to your facilitators, and I'll see you in about 15 minutes. So I know that was just a quick sort of check-in to sort of get started for the morning. This morning is going to be a series of sort of short breakout groups, really designed to start getting initial reactions. And in between, we'll have some different sort of presentations trying to draw out what some of our evidence group have thought about the response from government. But just a reminder that in the Assembly's report to Parliament, we presented 16 goals and 81 recommendations. And you'll see from the document that most of you have received, I think there's a couple of people we're still just organising to get it emailed to them if they've not received it yet, that the government has provided this sort of detailed response to them all. And actually we sent you that sort of just before Christmas when it came out. The evidence group have also looked at it and given some of their assessment, and that's there for you to think about, but you don't have to agree with them. And so over the course of the weekend, with our 81 recommendations and 16 goals, we're not going to try and do a process that we go and look at each one in detail, because it's not viable. We can't do that. We took 7 weekends to develop these 81, so we can't look at them all in detail. So to help you think through, the evidence group has done a bit of a sort of traffic light assessment, and Ian will talk a bit more about that later. And it's really there to help you sort of focus on the things that you as members think are most important. And that's what's going to drive the content, and that's what's going to drive the way that we put our response to government. So I'm going to hand over to Ian now, just to sort of give us a bit of framing, and we'll start talking about how different people have responded.
Thanks, Kayla. Yeah, it's time to look at the Scottish Government's response to the recommendations, and you should have received this document. Let me just bring it up. So you should have received this document, which includes the Scottish Government response, and also you'll see in there the kind of traffic light response of the assessment of the evidence group that looked through the response and categorised it into to 4 categories. So you'll see them here, colour coded. The dark green is the ones that are most kind of positive, going down to red for ones that were rejected or ignored. So just to explain this a little bit more, it may well be that for some of the recommendations that the evidence group members themselves had different views on the government's response. And so the ratings that you see there are, if you like, the middle point in our collective individual opinions, the average, if you like. But when a result fell between a boundary between 2 of the ratings, we erred on the cautious side. In other words, we went for the one below, the less positive assessment, so that we weren't too overly optimistic and positive about everything. I think it's really important to stress that our evaluation, the rating, is subjective. It's entirely possible for you to disagree with it, as Kayla said. So it's just a guide to help you think about, to help you make up your own mind, really, about how the government responded to all that hard work that you did. I think it's also worth remembering that the question you were asked was, how should Scotland change to tackle the climate emergency in a fair and effective way? And the recommendations you made included action in different levels of government for businesses, communities, individuals, for all of Scotland, which is probably why in some parts of the response, the Scottish Government said it supports the recommendation, but doesn't have the powers to implement the change that you suggested. So an example is this one from the recommendation 64, universal basic income, which talks about it's not feasible and it devolved powers to do that. So in these cases like this, you may wish to consider if the Scottish Government response satisfies you, that it's using its existing tools creatively, let's say, to support your recommendations. So I'm going to stop sharing now. I mean, there's a lot to digest. You'll see short videos from the people on the evidence group, the experts, if you like, about the different goals and some of the specific recommendations this morning. I guess before we delve into the detail, my brief take on the response in general is that Well, I was pretty impressed actually with the scope and the detail of the response document. I thought it was great to see that the government took your report in its entirety very seriously. They commented on every recommendation, including the Children's Parliament calls to action. But that's just my view. Let's now get the thoughts of Kevin Anderson, on his impression of the government response. We've got Kevin's here, but we've got a pre-recorded video from Kevin. So if we can run that video, thank you. Thanks for that, Kevin. So what we're now going to do is to move on and start to look into some of those specific goals and recommendations. To start with, we're going to hear from Dave and Pete on diet, land use and resources. If you remember, it's an important cluster for Scotland's contributions to climate change. It's just under a quarter of Scotland's greenhouse gas emissions are from agriculture and related land use. So I'm going to pass over to Chris to introduce how we're going to work and hear from Dave and Pete. So over to you, Chris.
That's brilliant. Thanks very much, Ian. So what we're going to be doing now over the course of the rest of the morning and a little bit over the course of the day is we've divided the goals into 4 clusters so that you as a group can have a real look and get a good overview of each of the goals over the course of the day. Okay, so you can think about, well, do you agree with the recommendations, with the response, and do you agree with what even our experts have said? And it's for you to have that debate and to think about that. So you have your documents. If I model here, you've got within your group and your facilitators, and we've repeated some of that on the Jamboards that you're about to use in your group. So even if you haven't got your document to hand, you'll be able to see your way through, and your facilitator will help you navigate through that enormously thick document, so you can make your comments and have a think about that. So we've got our first set of videos, and as Ian has said, we're going to be looking at diet, land use and resources, and it's Dave and Pete giving us some feedback, and then Kayla's just going to introduce your facilitated breakouts. Scott, over to you.
So just to say that you know, throughout the morning, we're going to be hearing from a number of the speakers and people in the evidence group that you've heard from before, and some that, you know, are coming in to join us now. As Ian said, their assessments and their responses are, you know, they are subjective. They're coming from their individual positions. They're coming with a level of expertise, and that's why they've been involved in all of this process with us. But it is up to you to see what you think is fair, whether it's a fair response or whether you'd like something more. And just one thing to clarify before we go into the breakout groups, I know there's been a little bit of confusion. Because in the government response, they responded to the goal separately, and then the recommendations, each recommendation separately, that each goal was sort of graded or traffic lighted as based on the response from government to that goal specifically, as in the document, and then each recommendation. So sometimes it does look a bit like unbalanced, but, you know, our experts are here to, so, you know, if you do have any questions or want a bit more sort of commentary on how things were assessed by them, you can call on them in the breakout groups. But actually, really, now it's about, they've given you a framework, they've given you some suggestions, they've given you some ideas of what they think, but really it's up to you. And as you know, all of our goals, you know, there's lots of crossover between lots of the different goals as well. So, you know, we're trying to structure this morning to work through some of the goals so that we do get a chance to look at the whole big picture. But, you know, some of the things that maybe the videos touched on might not be right exactly in the groups that you're going into right now, but you can still comment on them, you can still store it up, you can still build that information throughout the whole morning. So over to our facilitators, and we will see you soon. Hey, this looks like everybody's heading back in now, and it looks like all the breakout rooms are now closed. Thank you. Now, I know that was a short a short session, and I know you're sort of trying to get your head around this massive amount of information. The colour coding that's been done by the evidence group was there to try and give you a bit of a framework or a bit of a starting point, rather than it being a complete blank slate. But it's really about what you think are important, the things that you're happy with, the things that you're satisfied with, the things that you think actually government's given a really good response to things you've recommended, or the things that you're disappointed about. That's what it's about. So do try and keep that in mind. Don't get too hung up on necessarily what the colour coding is there. I've got one other thing I need to say before we go into the next set of evidence, which is many of you may have seen that the live transcript or the captioning has appeared, and it might be appearing on the bottom of your screen. We've had a request to have it on to help some members actually who, were struggling to sort of hear what was going on. So we're going to keep it running. If it is not useful to you or distracting to you, then there's a really easy way to turn it off. In your little toolbar, where same place usually where your mute button is, or your video button is, or the chat button is, there should be a thing popped up now that has a little CC and says live transcript. If you click on that, you should have the option to turn it off. So if you do find it annoying, you should be able to just turn it off that way, or you can message us if you're having a problem with it. But let's get on, because as I said, we're going to have 4 sort of series where we're looking at little groups of our goals, and some of the videos cross over, but these ones are largely going to focus around the idea of sort of looking at the goals that we had around work, transport, and business. So I'll hand over to Ian, and then we'll hear from some of the other evidence leads.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, we're going to hear from John and Ian now on transport, work and business. If you remember, transport is responsible for about a third of Scotland's greenhouse gas emissions. So it's going to be interesting to see what their response to that was. So I'll hand over and we'll hear that. So over to Chris to take us on.
Great, thanks for that. So I'm going to go straight into your breakout groups. Again, start focusing on the things that you think are important, or the particular goals that are most important to you. We know we can't cover everything in minute detail. We just don't have 3 weeks together. We've just got this couple of days. So let's make the most of it. Back into your breakout groups. What are you disappointed with? What are you pleased with? And pick on those goals that you feel most strongly about in this next cluster: transport, work, and business. Okay, off you go.
Okay, that looks like at least all the breakout rooms are closed, and hopefully people have had a chance to grab a cup of tea or have a quick break, but we will be starting again in a moment. So, I know what we're doing at the moment is a bit tough. There's so much information, but because the government response is very detailed. It engages with every one of the recommendations, every one of the goals, and outlines, what they are doing or are able to do, or what they're not able to do, or not, or choosing not to do. And really it will be throughout the rest of the weekend, focusing in on the things that are most important to you about, where they have made positive steps, and where maybe there are things that you think they're missing the trick there. And that's what it is. We're starting off by trying to cut across and remind ourselves of all of the different goals and recommendations that that were proposed by yourselves and put into the report and submitted to government. And there is a lot, but really bear with us through this morning, and it's this afternoon, you'll have a bit more time to really sort of step back from it and go, right, all these things that we've heard, the things that we're reading in the report, the things that we've discussed, what do we really want to include in our response back to government? So keeping on this pattern, the next ones that we're going to focus on are some of the goals and some of your recommendations that were around that kind of communities and housing, buildings and communities. So Ian, over to you.
Thanks, Kayla. Yeah, as a reminder, Scotland's homes are responsible for about 15% of our greenhouse gas emissions. So what we're going to hear now from is Daisy and Laurie talking about housing and communities. So if we can pass on to their video.
Okay, so lots of things there to think about. We're going to pop you straight back into the breakout rooms again. We're trying to cover the range this morning, and this afternoon we can come back to the detail. So over to your groups.
Great. A couple of you coming back now from your groups. I think, gosh, you have been working hard. Just wait for everyone else to come back now. There you go. You've all come back. I think we're ready to go. Lovely to see you all again. Take a big breath. You're working really hard. There's one more stint to go. We've got one more cluster of goals for you to look at. We're going to be looking at taxation, regulation, and measuring success. Before you go, just a reminder, all those videos and that we've been watching are available on the website, and over the course of the weekend, videos will be going up as they're shown. So the link is in the chat. It's in an email to you. There's plenty of those there for you to go back and have a look at. So before we go into our next session, have a little breath and let's hear from Ian.
Yeah, so everyone had pretty profound ideas really on taxation, regulation, and how we measure success. And so, for example, one of the things was wanting to shift our measures of success towards well-being and away from GDP and profit. So let's see how the government responded. We're going to hear from Catherine and Graham now.
Thank you, Catherine and Graham. Really insightful there. We're going to go straight back into our breakout groups. But remember, you will be breaking for lunch straight from your breakout groups. Okay, and your facilitators will let you go around 12:30. But apart from that, get stuck in. Off you go.